finalny efekt tego działania po omacku. I naprawdę staramy się w tym być możliwie skuteczni. Niektórzy ludzie, również moi znajomi poświęcają małżeństwa, szukając sposobów opisu tych zdarzeń.
To może inaczej, zmieńmy temat. Po ostatnim sukcesie zrobiło się o panu bardzo głośno, ale przecież zasłynął pan już dużo wcześniej. Serią wykładów dla osób nieobeznanych ze światem nauki. Na ścisłych kierunkach roi się od pańskich wychowanków. Ale przecież...
Tak, dobrze wspominam te spotkania.
Before we go through the story from the start, I should talk a bit about the space where I'll show the visuals. This is mind warm-up. It'll take 2 minutes. Let's look at a point. It's a simple item. Nothing simpler but the lack of it. There. Not there. There. Not there. There. There's hardly a simpler distinction. Let's give the point some freedom. The first space in history, and from now on, it can be here, here, or here, there. For the first continuous movement to take place, we need time and space. When I turn the view around, things are different. That initial symmetry is broken. What the object looks like now depends on the point of view. So now we have a point in time and space, which is enough for what I'm about to show to make sense. How do we get time and space? And why is there actually something instead of nothing? Science has no answer to that. Some religions do. We're looking at a section of space-time. Let's make it a bit denser. This grey slime, that's just so you can see better. The sound too. It's just there to show you. No one knows what space is really made of. I'll start swinging points around. Each one rages on its own, like noise on TV. No communication, only when I add these links, a kind of glue. There. So movement is passed on to neighbours. It's the first space where cause and effect work. It's only now we can even talk about a future, or a past, for this cube. Which instantly makes it more interesting. End of warm-up. Let's talk about life from the beginnings of the universe. The very beginning is probably infinite energy, outrageous temperature, and wrinkling of space-time. And first distinctions separate, like when boiling water oozes foamy scum. Gravitational waves. I'll separate the gravitational field from the rest of the noise, and we have this. The graviton. Within less than a nanosecond, there are new turbulences. It's gluons, but here another particle separates, the Higgs boson, God particle. Probably, at the moment when the Higgs field emerges, monster tensions and linkages are produced. It's inflation. Upon a violent relaxation, matter doesn't spread smoothly. On a cosmic scale, space-time wrinkles form everywhere, like a scrotum in winter. In quantum scale, the aforementioned Higgs field seems to suppress relaxation. The other fields wrinkle into new, distinct fluctuations. The first quarks, for instance. They're awfully small, vibrating among gluons. Photons and weak bosons W and Z separate. A new field of electrons also emerges, and they're perfect opposites, the positrons. The free electron is quite hard to show as a phenomenon, as it can be elsewhere in every frame of film. In simple words, the electron or another particle can be precisely shown in space, and its photograph is sharp. But then, we don't know about the direction it travels in, or I find out about the direction, but I'll lose the sharpness of position. We can never have both kinds of information at once with high precision. And now you can see quarks joined together. They're held by an immense force generated by gluons buzzing inside. New balls of energy are thus formed to last over time. They'll be called protons one day, or neutrons, depending on the way quarks are bound. Balls of energy fail to meet, as it's still too hot for them to link. Upon cooling down, some of them stick together. Around them, a field of photons buzzes. They cannot flow freely, always bumping into other items, electrons for instance. If we could look at that world from outside, it would be fog smothering radiation. Temperature keeps falling. Upon several million years, it's cool enough for free electrons to start clinging to those balls of energy. Stable clusters are formed. In a dozen billion years, people will call them hydrogen atoms. The once imprisoned photons shoot in all directions. A religious person might say, "There was light." For some billions of years, the universe keeps on expanding. Balls of energy, or atoms, float around. An atom is overlapping waves of very specific parameters. First, I'll mention the scale and proportions. They're incredible. If the atomic nucleus is the size of a prime minister's head, then the electron cloud is as big as Manchester. If the cloud were smaller, all of it would fall apart and we wouldn't be there. Now, fix your eyes on your thumb, on the nail. A few billion million atoms on the tip of the nail. It's good for you to train mind leaps like that. Quarks held by strong gluons are protons and neutrons. The latter, combined, create a superior cluster called the atomic nucleus. A positively charged nucleus oozes an electromagnetic field. A negative electron falls into this trap. So that there's any kind of permanence of the whole thing, the electron spreads around the center. Hence the popular image of atoms as small jelly beans or balls. It's a huge simplification. It's more like a sphere of fog thickening towards the center. A different amount of protons and neutrons inside is a different shape of fog on the orbit. I haven't made that up. This much you can see directly under a special AFM microscope. That is the beauty in physics. Theoretical fun on paper coincides with what is seen under a microscope. This will one day be called carbon. Entirely different properties while colliding and sticking. It's only these differences that chemistry stems from, and the possibility of forming all these sorts of molecules. Let's add 92 protons. The electron cloud takes an eerily complex shape. Nonetheless, the nucleus is unstable. It pukes photons in all directions. They tremble aggressively. Atoms collide incessantly. Exchange of photons eventually occurs, and transfer of the movement direction. This is the simplest collision. The problem is, it might work out different. For instance, the photon emitted can skip like so, or so. Possibilities are many. Too many. To precisely calculate the angles of electron collisions will make the fastest computer crash. Nonetheless, once we've worked out a few dozen diagrams of collisions, we can obtain an approximation sufficient to meet human needs. Plugs, computers, washing machines. These events were once counted by hand for you to be able to switch on the light in the staircase. Does anyone even know who we owe that to? While I'm talking about staircases, atoms of helium and hydrogen thicken into the first structures visible to the naked eye. This thickening of atoms will one day be named a nebula. I have a purpose in not showing colour. Colour is a human invention. For colour to be visible, we need an observer with a brain which can produce the impression of red. Otherwise, it's just an anonymous vibration, like sound with no witness. So these shots should stay black and white until spiders are created. But as the public, you are observers and you do have brains, so I'll let colour in already. The range of waves seen with our eyes is meagre. Let's say someone's hand is drifting here. We miss very dense photon waves called X-rays. Now, somewhat longer waves are ultraviolet. We almost see them. Next, there's that familiar blue. Even longer waves, that's green. Then red. A bit longer waves, and there we go, missing out. It's infrared, received by touch as warmth. Even longer waves are microwaves. Their crests are several centimeters long. They yield a very poor image. Waves longer than a meter are radio waves. They are invisible, but the radio will receive them. That someone's hand is a bit too small to reflect them well. We've just made it to see the first visible structures which the normal audience has heard about. It'll get easier from now on. This is one of the first galaxies which emerged. How's it even possible today to see an event from 13 billion years ago? Well, when looking into the sky, we look into the past. It's only now that photons released in these times reach us. Worst thing is, our space-time keeps expanding. So part of them won't catch up with us at all. This is how a natural frontier forms, an end to our observation. Looking at this frontier, the last thing we see is a wall of photons called background radiation coming our way. Should you like to experience that, switch your TV onto an empty channel. The radio buzz is largely background radiation from the beginnings of the universe. Balls form which are the size of small towns. They're pulsars. They spin 700 times per second. Just imagine what's going on in there. If you took all the public railway wagons and pressed them into the size of a sugar cube. This pulsar winds onto itself matter from a nearby star, a vampire. With unabated gravitational flow, a whole menagerie of creations originates in various stages of metamorphosis. millions of years go by. Some stars lose their balance and start yielding to pressure. Here, it shows that the star softens up. The death of a big star is spectacular. A series of shocks pukes a layer into the cosmos. Among the shreds are also atoms of carbon and oxygen, the same ones you're made of, plus there's other heavier atoms. They join other condensations, forming new clots. Planets suspended in space. Let's talk about nothing for a minute. What is space made of? Is it empty? Or else, what is there between two nearby atoms? I don't want to discuss vacuum like a physics teacher, because you'll take it for abstract matter that doesn't concern you. It'll be better to show it on something common. The artist brings alcohol home. The bag is made of black plastic. It's mainly chains of hydrogen and carbon atoms. Look at the spot where the bag weighs down on his finger. Tense atoms emit virtual photons, thanks to which the bag won't penetrate through the finger. We have hardness. It seems you can zoom in ad infinitum. It's a recipe for a mathematical catastrophe. There are few options not to go crazy. For the time being, it's helpful to establish the shortest possible length and assume that the world's smallest pixel is the so-called Planck's length. Anything smaller than that is undifferentiated. Another proposal is this. Note the noise. It's quantum foam. Loops of space-time flicker. This flickering is where our tri-dimensional space and time emanate from. Or we can assume that the smallest point in space has more to it. Additional dimensions are curled into shapes. These determine the way atoms vibrate in 3 dimensions. Coming back to the chronology of events, some galaxies collide. A sudden process throws stardust into vacuum. On one of the star's orbits, the dust thickens into small clots. Creaky pebbles. This one's the size of a fist. A few million years later, it's the size of Germany. Millions of years go by, and gravity slowly enforces a spherical shape. Unluckily, another ball enters the collision course. 2 orbs are left and lots of dust. The lighter shred starts spinning around the heavier ball. It has survived the collision. The fog gets even denser. It binds atoms of oxygen, carbon, sulfur, and hydrogen. A big part comes from stones which evaporated during the collisions. Toxic rains. This young planet is a transition place where atoms combined into big molecules can hold on longest in their trembling stability. On stars, that won't do. Everything tears apart there. Stability allows for keeping up new states of matter. Water is perfect for binding molecules in even stranger shapes. There, it'll move them a bit. No tearing, though. In some spots on land, warm mud is formed. It is bombarded with photons that come flying in from the closest star. Photons bring particles in vibration. The distance from the star is such that the mud neither fries nor freezes. A similar mechanism occurs deep underwater, near warm currents coming out of hell from the planet's insides. What is being formed here is made out of the most common atoms. On land, the next bombarding phase takes place. Mud, seen up close, is seed mustard of various molecules. The wall is clung to by simplest balls of energy, or hydrogen atoms. They're the only ones that can do so. Others bounce away. This is how lots of atomic spikes are set aside. They're officially called fatty acids, but that's a disgusting word. Spikes can't glue together as water is boiling. The geyser explodes and throws it all in the wind. Some drops of water are spiked. Water evaporates and spikes remain in a stellate layout. Hedgehogs are formed. Their official name is mycellae. Hedgehogs emerge on land and in the deeps. Part of them gets thrown out in foam. Let's look closer. The wave motion makes the hedgehogs join in sheets. With fluctuations and the acidic environment, the sheets curl up into balls. This is how membranes form, the most complex structures on the planet. Bear in mind that here there's still water particles all around, but I have to exclude them from view so that we can see anything. Some membranes reach scandalous sizes. We'll come back to these in a minute, as in the meantime, in muddy areas on the shore, even more interesting structures emerge. On the clay walls, molecular chains are set aside, or strings, as they're flimsy and tear easily. More and more of them. With the vast ocean space with violent storms, no wonder the strings came across membranes. Most strings are torn into shreds, but some of their fragments happen to fall inside the membrane. That's how a capsule is formed. With string inside sheltered from the surrounding chaos, they can tangle and randomly combine into longer chains. This kind of process goes on for some millions of years in all warm oceans. Containers keep growing. The bigger ones absorb the smaller. There is no purpose or will to survive, physical forces only. Finally, the membrane is cast onto the shore. The wind ruffles the foam. The container can't take it. The content is divided at random. Strings inside remain intact and can go on sticking together freely. They have different particle models. The ones which took shapes encouraging simple divisions multiply more efficiently, sheltered by the container. The most durable models live for as long as a few months. Thousands of copies form from them. Some mutate at random. Here, an atom is shifted. Ah, that links a bit better. Most of these shapes are good for nothing. But once in a while, a shape is formed, which helps strengthen the container from the inside. Some strings have time to curl into spirals. The atom layout fosters this. This seems improbable and too purposeful, but figure that one drop of water holds 5 undecillion atoms. So how many chances of similar events are there in the globe's oceans over the course of the next 10 million years? After millions of years, durable string cannot exist without containers, and vice versa. You can see the areas for trash disposal. The protrusions you see help move in whichever direction is richer in useful building material. I'd say cells, but this is a cliched name. I'll refer to them as capsules. Survival capsules. Why? Because strings have now found themselves in the best position, sheltered from all the surrounding mess, longer than ever. We can remember how first containers divided under gusts of wind. After so many years of shredding, it's less random. Let's take a closer look. The string trembles around discs. It's an introduction to denser packing. The discs tighten up even more, and the spooled string takes a shape which tangles the least possible. A baguette. The spindle from the stretchers additionally fosters the baguette's fitting together. And here you can see a hook called a kinetochore. Left, we have strings spooled on discs. All is set. Along the tubules, kinesins and dynans start. They signal. It's time to divide. Capsules are more numerous, and each of them holds new copies of string. Ineffective ways of dividing are lost forever. Broken string goes into the abyss, and its molecules will produce some new string. That's not all. The capsule conglomerate keeps expanding. Multiplication is regulated. Proper concentration of chemicals slows it down or changes the direction. Initially, capsules multiply via simplest division. The underwater swinging of some clusters slowly takes its toll on the string's atomic model. Out of some areas that carry electrons better, calyces are formed. This has no purpose. But sometimes the electrons extracted from the background skip so far over the body that random contortions are produced. The generations whose contortions lead them towards light and food survive. Others are lost. Some 100,000 generations later, you can see the distinct concentration on the crest. Most photons come from above. Here, one of the sides is more dense, which orders up the mess in the electron flow. The thing's motion is less chaotic, an innovation that makes capsule multiplication efficient. The systems which shrink at the shade moment last longer and multiply more string. Next generations come in ever stranger shapes and behavior. Body shape is the external expression of string hidden in each survival capsule. The ones that multiply with abandon are dangerous as they mess up the environment. The ones with the division counter are left on the scene. If the body hasn't managed to copy the string, then its model is lost forever. In the meantime, here comes danger. Due to its position towards the nearby star, the planet slowly turns into a ball of ice. The cold means slower vibrations. Stillness may make these splendid molecular machines scarce, but somewhere deep beneath the ice, a few strings keep on ruffling. Closed off in particularly thick survival capsules. A few 100,000 laps later, the planet is aligned differently again. The ice melts, and we get a new tide of photons. Everything multiplies even faster with less and less loss in strings. Some capsules excrete oxygen atoms. It's quite reactive. Ever stranger shapes grow. Strings get transport again. This cluster has as much as 250,000 capsules, called neurons. In each one there's string. An ordered flow of impulses leads to an ordered movement. Let's sum it up before people arrive. The string is found in cells of every living being, starting from cabbage, then snails, and finally in humans. Nature is blind, sadly. In 2008, a fragment of string was rearranged in the fruit fly. Its offspring's bodies were overgrown with extra eyes. The insects died, but the eyes worked partly right. The same fragment, called PAX6, is in your body. It regulates eye growth.
Jak przy takich osiągnięciach, przy takich nagrodach, przy tak czasochłonnej pracy znaleźć jakiś czas dla bliskich?
Jaki czas? Co to znaczy?
No, ma pan młodą żonę, byłą studentkę, rocznego synka. Czy ma pan dla nich czas?
No ale... Przepraszam, bo nie wiem skąd pani wie. Zresztą to chyba... Jaki to ma związek z naszą rozmową?
No, pytam po prostu po ludzku, czy w tym natłoku obowiązków znajduje pan czas dla swoich bliskich?
Znajduję albo nie znajduję, ale to naprawdę nie ma związku z tą rozmową.
No, a gdybyśmy wyłączyli nagrywanie?
Ale przepraszam, czy pani nie rozumie, co to znaczy nie potrafię?
In search of energy, the survival machines move further into land. After so many million years of copying, the transport for strings takes quite a mobile form. As yet, the strings which have survived are those that form a kind of a super system. I mean a herd. Ancestors from another continent didn't understand what death is. It's only the next generations who begin to grasp that. The wandering goes on for several thousand years. The offspring is a bit smarter. A volcanic explosion on the opposite side of the globe reduces their number to a few thousand.
Every transcription is precious, as these are probably the world's most complex structures. The ones who straighten their backs see more. Keeping bodies straight is tiring. They do it seldom, but in the better nourished herds, it's become a habit to imitate. This thin layer of cells gets denser with every generation, which is why communication within the herd gets much better. These brains discern minor nuance. Body language is faster than sound, energy saving. Expressive eye whites make it easier to read directions of looks. They make tools. This is something you can't transfer in the string. The young mimic the parents. For the first time, weaker individuals are valuable. They are carriers of behavior, which is not there in the strings. It's in the brains instead, as a sustained impulse flow. In 100,000 years, this will be named culture. One of the most contagious skills is control over fire. The whole group becomes a superior survival capsule. It's bound by social ties, simple emotions, and beginnings of love as we know it. Dispassionate as of yet. Multiplying bodies is still vital for the strings, but protecting the brain gets more important than ever. From now on, biology goes hand in hand with culture. Next to the dead body, they lay down tools and hides, in case she wakes up. The brain is dense enough to allow creating event simulation. No risk, no need to leave the cave. Today, we call it imagination. Fear of harsh weather gets combined with fear of predators. That I don't know how to show, but see what's before my eyes when I think of those days. Like an impression. In the more developed brains emerges a sensation of some impalpable being of tremendous supremacy. Can be seen in rituals. These behaviors are transferred by mimicry from one generation to the next. They make their way into brains of more and more beings. In only a few thousand years, the wide notion of God comes about. Where the situation is stable, faith in a protective and kind deity is usually formed, like a flow of opium milk. But where nature is brutal, what develops most often is a belief in a capricious deity, clotted milk, compote, and smells. Religious behaviors also mutate. Those which help survive last in millions of brains of patterns of neuron activity. Thousands of years later, only a few prominent religious behaviors remain on the globe. People reside in groups of a few hundred, often near rivers. In these small social cells, simple punishment is developed, concerning incest and all actions which lead to degradation in the group. For instance, having several partners at a time is a tough challenge. It's a constant fight with other males, which is probably why monogamous relationships get more numerous. Individuals living outside norms are expelled from groups. Clear bans for harmful behaviour arise. With small populations, it's especially important. We call it law today. Extreme conservatism, however, leads to a lack of adaptation in new conditions. Group degradation follows. Too many mischief makers, in turn, cause disappearance of rules and create chaos, which also devastates the tribe. Religions and laws usually promote conservatism, striving at keeping up tribe behaviours. In this way, a shaky balance between stability and elasticity of societies is kept. Oh, sorry. Over thousands of years, this self-regulation turns out to foster the longevity of the largest groups. As a result, the DNA strings are doing better than ever. I've just presented 10 million years in 4 minutes. Sorry, but it's good sometimes to see these things from the DNA strings perspective, not like human only.
Ale przecież w każdej kulturze są osoby podejrzliwe wobec wizji świata nauki. Takie osoby muszą uwierzyć na słowo, że gdzieś głęboko w atomach są kwarki, że te łańcuchy DNA rzeczywiście mają po pół metra. Te osoby muszą uwierzyć na słowo, że...
Co, lądowanie na Księżycu? Nic nie muszą. Wie pani, proszę tu napluć.
Słucham?
Nie no, proszę napluć.
No dobrze.
Dziękuję.
Innymi słowy chodzi mi o to, że to jest pańska historia świata, ale są też inne.
No tak, z tym jest właśnie problem. Jeśli komuś nie podobają się te kinezyny chodzące po DNA, twierdzi, że to jest zbyt naciągnięte, żeby było prawdziwe, że fotony to jakaś nasza bajka równoważna z innymi bajkami, no to taka osoba powinna poszukać sobie kraju, gdzie prawa fizyki są bardziej przystępne, molekuły większe, filozoficznie łagodne. Takich osób nic nie przekona. No. A to, co jest pod mikroskopem, to jest taki, jaki jest. I sami nie wiemy dlaczego. No ale ta niewiedza jest w gruncie rzeczy dużo lepsza niż z góry znane odpowiedzi. O. To jest nitka pani DNA. Jeszcze po niej pewno jeżdżą kinezyny. Możemy zejść na dół i zobaczyć to na żywca.
String division in people is a dramatic process. You're really lucky to have been able to hatch. Look how little you need for something to go wrong. A couple of atoms. Day one. It starts out classic. A farmer's spermatozoons carrying string. They swarm around the female egg, dissolving the wall. It plant's tangled string inside. Some proteins attach immediately. It's nucleosome. It spins the string onto its disc, as discs allow efficient packing. They curl into cigars. They're chromosomes. The microtubule spindle helps to compress and makes them stand on end. This hook is a kinetochore. Here it checks if division should start. Not yet. Not yet. Not yet. But now, dinins and kinesins drag along the spindle, regulating the load. Braces let out cigars and spindles draw backwards, spreading out up there. See, there's a problem with this bracket. It hasn't let out a cigar to divide. It's been left inside, one too many. The body is growing. Riplosomes copy with an error. Day 3, 8 capsules now. Oh, a loop. Another problem. And again, tape wound in the tape recorder. And now it multiplies over limbs. Slightly altered protein is formed. The child grows, has Down syndrome and problems with its fingers. The parents don't know that yet. The body takes shape. I don't have to remind you what it's all made of. Boy or girl? Brain structures responsible for the sex form quite slowly. The primary pattern is female. It's only the soaking with testosterone that makes the difference. That one's a boy. Or not. Maybe. Not much hormone. Probably a boy, but with a brain built like a female's. The environment will shape the rest.
Wasz instytut wydał wczoraj 300 000 na badania nad wolną wolą. Co ma wolna wola do nauk ścisłych?
Te badania są nam potrzebne, żeby znaleźć lek osłabiający natręctwa myślowe i depresję przy chorobie Parkinsona. Jesteśmy naprawdę blisko. No i zresztą akurat zespół pośrednio dostał nagrodę właśnie za to.
Za walkę z natręctwami czy z Parkinsonem?
Obydwa. Myślę, że tu w tym budynku są przynajmniej 2 osoby cierpiące na natręctwa myślowe. I to nie jest oczywiście częste mycie rąk, bo z tym można jakoś żyć. Mówię o natręctwach myślowych, na przykład o obawie przed utratą kontroli, czy robieniem paskudnych rzeczy. To potrafi niszczyć ludziom życie. Naprawdę, na przykład ludzie, na przykład u osób mocno religijnych, to są często myśli świętokradcze, pornograficzne, nie wiem, wyobrażenia na pogrzebie siostry, nie wiem, no.
Let's deal with the organ which enabled such a tiny group of beings to change so much all over the globe. This is my father, Stanislav. I don't want to discuss the brain as they do in school, on anonymous drawings and dummies. I like it truer, for you to feel that all of it concerns you every day. Let's look at Stanislav's brain. The deeper the area, the more basic function it holds. This is the brainstem, a primitive reptile part. Breathing, heartbeat, salivating, digestion. This part is the limbic part, responsible for emotions and simple social behaviors. And back there is the cerebellum, motion coordination. The outer ridged layer is the area in which complex processes are processed. The point of that joke about the Prime Minister, calculations, awareness of the self, and imagination. Obviously, the borders are not sharp. Our behavior results from a rhythmic melody of these structures. When the melody loses the rhythm, problems arise. Stanislav, for instance, has Parkinson's, but that's for later. Looking closer, the knots turn out to be capsules called neurons. Of course, each of them is a capsule for the string. It can also send information. The way this happens is extraordinary. Current flow in an integrated circuit is nothing compared to this. Ordinary current is electrons flowing in a specific direction. In the brain, it's different. Everyone seems to realize that, but somehow Showing nervous impulse as Christmas lights is an embarrassment and introduces bad thinking habits. It gets more interesting. Here we have an atom surplus. They want to mix with the ones inside, but a wall separates them. Nature strives at levelling out surplus, so tension is produced. The capsule wall is a membrane spiked with valves, which eventually let go, in a rhythm that makes it a cascade of pumpings. This thing is an impulse. This is how our thoughts flow, not like on a wire. The average impulse speed is 100 kilometers per hour. On the tip, excitement makes bags with dust open, professionally called neurotransmitters, but you can also say dust. These are super tiny particles, a few dozen atoms at the most. Upon release, they cling to channels at the other side. The energy cascade moves on, and the rest of the dust gets absorbed and packed in bags again. Why does the brain need these breaks? To regulate the impulse flow more precisely, among other things. We have several kinds of dust. For instance, shortage in this, dopamine, gives symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Too little dust, and impulses do not move on, which in effect interferes with Stanislav's muscle performance. I'd like to apologize in advance to my colleagues for the scandalous simplification. To be fair with this, I'd have to make a TV series on synapses. Look at Amelia for a change, Stanislav's wife. She's making a scarf for her husband. Counting the rows, you can see the activation of areas above the ears. A branch of this neuron is a dendrite. In real time, little stems form on its walls and die, and so it goes. Stems are surrounded with a molecular scaffolding. It's actin. Its growth influences the shape of stems. A pause for biologists. This is cofilin, for instance. It helps to grow the scaffolding. And here's the ARP2 to 3 joint. A friend of mine invented the name. Why does my mother need it at all? Let's see. She's counting the rows. Each number remembered means physically thickening the dendrite stems. The scaffolding makes bridges between dendrites. The impulse goes another way. These seconds are enough to sustain attention over a row number. Not only the stems have scaffolding, whole neurons have it. Virtually all cells in your bodies. And this is Bruno. New transport for my string. Bruno has a myriad of sensory receptors. They're dispersed throughout the body. In this strip of the brain, there's a map of sensation. If I were to show it in 3D, this sort of homunculus would form. The bigger the fragment, the more innervated the body region. In a dog, the map looks different. The guts are also mapped, but the resolution is much lower. Thankfully enough, as the sensation of swallowing in HD is some kind of gluey schizophrenia. Not to mention sex. Or excretion. which is what my son is doing. Let's look at the drive of Bruno's intestines, although this concerns all of your muscles. Thick fibre is composed of minor ones, made up of even smaller ones, sarcomeres. All in all, it's almost the same scaffolding as in the brain. Actin in oblong form. Upon a signal from the brain, actin filaments are moved along an immobile slat of myosin. A similar mechanism works in the heart, all your life without rest. Stuff moves through the intestines. I'm only showing one sarcomere, one fibre. But when a finger or poo are to be moved, this happens in bulk along all fibres.
Co babcia ma?
By the way, have you ever seen a child's skull? Not much, but a second set of teeth is waiting there. Stanislav is observing an object. Let's watch it in slow motion. Initially, Stanislav doesn't know what he's looking at, though he might have seen it many times. The backyard is penetrated by waves, the internet, cell phones, TV, the army. These are colourless vibrations, differentiated only by crest density. Atoms on a watermelon. The surrounding waves are bouncing off them. A photon spurt gushes into the eyes, passing through cloudy spots and sits in the back of the eye. Here, in the back of the eye, the waves are divided and transferred to the optic nerve, meeting in his head and then flowing into the back of the skull to the area known as V1. In V1, the signals from the eye are not understood as a watermelon. Part of the impulses go further onto V2, but they hook against memory areas, the melody of this shape as it overlaps with the pattern of red seen somewhere. Stanislav gets the impression of something red. Then there's dispersion onto other areas of V3, V4, and so on. A quarter of a second later, Stanislav does not know what he's looking at. The sum of signals gets through here, the hippocampus or the memory area. A comparison takes place with familiar objects.
If it's positive, then signals reach consciousness, and somewhere in the front of his head, Stanislav senses, oh, a watermelon. The fruit has provoked an association with warm climes that he'd never visited. Subjectively, Stanislav senses this as regret. Sleep function is somewhat like defragmentation of nervous links, removing unfinished stems, thickening the ones often used. This is probably what brings forth dreams. Some kinds of dust get extinguished altogether. Whereas a stronger activity in the amygdala or the emotion area and the hippocampus or memory infuses dreams with strange images. The sleeper is not responsible for their content. This depends largely on proportions in dust and the memory's layout. Why does the body stay in bed despite such things under its eyelids? Because an ancient reticular formation here sends suppressing signals to the spinal cord and silences motor neurons. Sleepwalkers will disagree. Stanislav is asleep. We will take advantage of nighttime to discuss more mysterious matters. Each of us, including Amelia, has a sense of the self. I, Amelia. We place it somewhere in here. Or here. Yes, in my case, it's here. Close your eyes, please, and recall a toothache.
It is a clear but elusive feeling, a percept. I see something like this. You see something else. And my question is, where does this impression come from? From some mental space? Is it enough to explain it as work of the neural network? How is the neuron tension converted to mental images in your mind? A little more is known about the imagination. Essentially, it is the ability to observe your own thoughts. We can instantly create a mind in the mind and engage in self-reflection. Imagination is simulating events without leaving home. In computers, it's called a virtual machine. You need a lot of RAM. In people who use their imagination professionally, these machines are often monstrous, at the cost of other skills, obviously. Look at a man of letters. He's polishing this sentence. I'll eat these stones off the wall while chewing. The shards will mix with my teeth into a single taste. The man of letters' trained system detects mess or energy wasting in the brain. Immediately, it strives at simplification. I eat stones. They're the taste of teeth. Perfect. Not more, not less. Those insensitive to literature will not sense the pleasant melody of this phrase. I eat stones. They are the taste of teeth. But as a biologist, I have a question. Where do people take things as refined as modern art from? One thing hung on another. Wood slats. Defacing. Nudity. And these freaking neons. Some sort of evolutionary fitness for brains? Oh, and secretions.
Jak wygląda pański dzień w pracy?
To jest nudne, nic ciekawego. To głównie pisanie wniosków o granty.
No tak, tylko że ja mam na myśli tę bardziej twórczą część pracy biologa molekularnego. Mówi się o tym, że badacie przestrzeń.
Oj, nie, no zepsujemy reportaż.
No ale proszę przynajmniej spróbować nam o tym opowiedzieć. Tak jak 6-latkowi.
Wie pani, to jest tak, że ja dzielę tę przestrzeń na coraz mniejsze piksele, szukając tam nowych rzeczy, różnic. Ale w pewnym momencie nie mogę już odbić promienia, bo długość oświetlającej to fali fotonowej jest większa niż obserwowany wycinek przestrzeni. W związku z tym nie odbija się już z powrotem do oka. Wtedy trzeba przejść do obserwacji pośrednich.
A co to znaczy?
Pośrednie wykrywanie najmniejszych cząstek przypomina trochę pracę kryminologa na klatce schodowej. Obserwujemy ściany detektorów po zderzeniach tych najmniejszych cząstek i próbujemy zrozumieć, co tam zaszło. Naprawdę zdziwilibyście się państwo, ile można odkryć na podstawie tych rozbryzgów z ofiar. No.
No dobrze, w takim razie ostatnie pytanie. W październikowym artykule Świata Nauki sugerował pan, że maszyny zupełnie prześcigną nas w myśleniu.
No, nie wiem, no powiedziałem trochę inaczej, ale nie mam pojęcia, co będzie w przyszłości.
No to może na koniec rozmowy spróbujmy bezczelnie przewidzieć ogólną tendencję rozwoju ludzkości. Życia w ogóle.
Ale nie wiem, czy pani sobie zdaje sprawę, że ja bardzo wiele ryzykuję, próbując zmyślić przyszłość na antenie.
No ale nikt nas z tego nie będzie rozliczał. To jest nasze wewnętrzne, redakcyjne nagranie.
To niepoważne.
Odtworzą ten wywiad za 100 lat w dniu pańskich urodzin i zobaczymy, jak bardzo pan przestrzelił.
Że od teraz
Tak, od dzisiaj.
Od dzisiaj w górę.
I don't know. Your brain's now working on the verge of transfer, mine as well. The fibers are so thin that a denser cortex seems impossible. Further condensation is noise, epilepsy, and static. That is probably why the internet, an excrescence on our brains, was created. In 2015, we already have several hundred satellites. They let out balloons so that the network covers the Earth like a second atmosphere. But let's go further. I imagine that there is no annihilation of humanity. The planet gets quite crammed, while electronic devices crawl closer and closer to human heads. And there is a way out from the century-long stagnation in physics. These flying cars must eventually come into existence. Americans still prohibit filming urban fountains as suspicious behavior, but fear of terrorism gradually fades. Longing for the old aesthetics increases, which is why not much seems to be changing. Electronic fabrics enhance the eruption of motley chaos. Youths are out of ideas for mixing styles. They promote fashion for identical uniforms for everyone and total obedience. Nobody cares for terrorists. Quality of life improves. Even along the equator, physical suffering declines. The Otis Group is the first to copy a minute of dog's brain activity onto a data carrier. It then runs a clone on a virtual machine. We slowly enter the era of mind uploading. A mere several decades later, in the western wing of the headquarters, that data is successfully uploaded onto the brain of a volunteer. For the first time, if only for a few seconds, a human experiences directly what's going on in a dog's head. And does not forget after being unplugged. It is easier from here to form a human-to-human interface. Sugar is the first to volunteer. Brain activity is changed into a program. It can be put into various data carriers. 200 minds can be run simultaneously on bred networks. Of course, there are glitches from simplifications, but after Sugar's death, his consciousness lives on in many copies called instances. Serious ethical problems arise. Conservatives want to stop that, while in the meantime, tissue hardware proliferates. The biggest conflict of values since the artificial womb controversy seems imminent. A platform that allows adding and removing instances is created according to needs. The connectome runs ceaselessly,
No, it does not turn against humanity. It just needs cooling all over. It must be the most influential phenomenon since the internet. At first, the connectomes used to resolve genetic problems and develop new physics. But commercial applications of the connectome appear soon. It's only a few decades later that they managed to link the connectome with the old internet, which has been treated like air for a long time now. Most people breathe information. Memory is no longer necessary. Even chewing gum is connected to the network. Not to mention paper. The brain gets a bit smaller, but people don't get dumber. It's as if the body is less necessary. Age is prolonged to nonsensical limits. The world record is held by Ardol Unuro. His body keeps up the extended brain tissue for over 300 years, which feels like 1,000 from inside. Once in a while, a safety copy is made, a mind save. Emulation can be stopped and resumed, which will theoretically prolong life in infinity. Can you combine minds? You can. That's how the issue of sexual reproduction gradually disappears. What's going on in politics? The progressive encourage the elderly to use emulation. Some countries experiment with politics and economy, controlled by fast processes, not people. Both governments and citizens come off quite well with this, whereas conservative parties focus too much on the past, being above all preoccupied with the increasing dissolution of national borders. The number of military conflicts decreases. Army aircraft are remodeled into autonomous weapons. The pilot's profession is now a thing of the past. The same goes for troops. Protests still serve to regulate the speed of progress, as always. This really is a problem. The unemployed go crazy en masse. Suicides among animals are harder to explain. No wonder if cities clean themselves up. Everything happens by itself. A few hundred years go by. What's up in architecture? The gaudy motleys in retreat. Finally. Future is easy to discuss in the context of a glamorous metropolis. What's with the countryside? In Poland, for instance. Grudzinski 800 years later. Even though the pollution and salt water problems have been solved, there's recurrent concern for energy resources. Everything eats them up. Only work in a simulated environment uses less material resources. Many spheres of life are transferred entirely into the connectome. world population, traditionally understood, starts to slowly decrease. Not because there's not enough people. It's just that humanity changes its state of matter into a more frugal one. Corporeality is no longer energetically profitable. Almost everything happens inside the connectome, whole lives. A huge part focuses on automaton production. It's a new industrial revolution of sorts. This goes on for a few hundred years. Automatons build more servers, buildings. I don't mean constructions only. The connectome learns in a way beyond reason. Cores. Here are national symbols and big razors. Our intellectual advantage is lost. Automatons do all right in the outside world, but now it's almost inaccessible for physical beings. Only the toughest stay there, their children and some fortified plants. Bodily persons follow the fate of Aborigines from a few thousand years before. This disturbing thing is utility fog. It helps control the weather and facilitates many other dispersed tasks. Local temperatures are regulated in accordance with the calculation center's needs. Subsequent inventions result simply from life's inert tendency towards a possibly optimal information transfer. Are there any conflicts at all? There are. They involve competing for energy resources for your own network. The usual thing, basically. Connectome Area AO232 is the first to create an apparatus to draw energy directly from the sun. These are, among others, Dyson rings, ridiculed in 2014. The patent is sold to other networks, exchanged for access to their energy sources, even the outdated ones. Every photon starts to count. Space travel is mainly base transceiver station installation. But even the largest transports start with no witness by now. Individual bodies don't exist for some time now. What counts is activity patterns in the network. See, this is a second level of civilization. The connectome takes the energy for it from nearby stars. Is there space in it for less practical things, the equivalents of music or sense of humor? That's hard to guess. The old world looks extremely functional. No need for colors, as there are no eyes. Server facilities are placed in an extremely efficient way. To us, that's a sorry sight, but we only see the outside effect of these actions. Because what happens inside these networks is inconceivable for a single brain. No use in trying. What's next? It happens for whole planets to get covered in something like paper clips, as the local network made faulty nanomachines. Perhaps this is a form of sense of humor. Well, and then it's a nightmare of a schizophrenic from the human perspective, the third level of civilization. Stations for energy intake from galaxies are distributed onto large areas of the cosmos. No aerials or fiber optics. There's less and less matter in general. It's starting to resemble a thoughtful vacuum of an increasingly less random flux. It can be suspected that a recreational activity of the network is to simulate the old times. Life on Earth, for instance. Just as we would once frisk through atoms, here it's dimensions that are frisked through. The old sun and its surroundings have long died out, sucked out of any photon remains. The thing is grabbing increasingly larger areas. I don't know. I can also try to show it as perfectly distributed points of transmission. New vacuum trembles incomprehensibly. I don't know what's next.